Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramie, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for Thursday, March 3rd, 2022. How are you today? I'm Kevin Laramie, joined by Duane Rollins, as we, of course, talk about Chelsea being for sale today. I am wearing my Chelsea kit, and I still don't know how to take that news. Of course, it's for good reasons, and we'll bring down all the reasons why Roman Abramovich is going to try to sell the club. We'll break down, of course, the Roman Abramovich era, Duane. We'll look at the trophies won by Chelsea across the last 2 decades, and also the business that Abramovich did do with Chelsea. Quite a business of money if you want to look at the value of the club now versus when he bought it. We'll, of course, talk about breaking news earlier today. St. Louis City SC has announced their first official designated player for 2023. If you don't know who St. Louis City SC is, it's the next expansion team in Major League Soccer, and next year they'll make their debut. But first, Duane, how are you today?
Doing pretty well. The St. Louis news, I've been following them pretty interesting. I like their build so far, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I also looked on my weather app this morning, Kevin, and we used to joke back in the early days of TFC when they were really bad that there was like the gods hated TFC because it'd be like beautiful, beautiful, beautiful game day, rainy and cold, beautiful. And so I'm looking at the app today. It's 0 degrees Celsius is the high on Saturday. 24 hours later, the Celsius high is 14 Celsius. If you think in Fahrenheit, that's from 35, 36 to 60 overnight.
That's a big difference. Hey, big difference. And of course, we like the weather because we're in Canada. And at this point, it still feels weird to talk about soccer because it's March 3rd. Usually the season actually starts at this point, so it's not that weird. But today, we'll do touch on the Canadian Championship as well. Later today, Duane will break down the update that was done by Canada Soccer yesterday. Also, the announcement of the game that actually will take place right to your... Duane has the scarf right there if he wants to show it. Right, Hamilton game. Forge versus Toronto FC, June 2nd, 2022 for the 2020 Voyageurs Cup. Why not? Better late than never.
Yeah, I joked on Twitter that we all should show up as our favorite time traveler. Like, you could go in a DeLorean, I put my little bow tie on like Doctor Who, like, hey, it's 2020, we're going to party like it's 2020. Although 2020 was really bad. So
well, 2020 was really bad, yes. It's not like it got better since. Let's face it. 2021 was bad, and then 2022, well, hasn't really started the best way. Let's be honest. But let's not hide from the truth. We all know right now what's going on with Russia and with Ukraine, and the news that we want to start the show with is related to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. Owner of Chelsea Football Club is Roman Abramovich, one of the biggest oligarchs in Russia, of course, and he has decided to sell the club. The club is already under stewardship, but he will sell the club. He will give all the proceeds to Ukraine, at least to funds serving victims of the war in Ukraine. He does not want to be a distraction for the club, and let's face it, even though they did win yesterday, Chelsea did manage to mention that this was a distraction for them. They don't live under a rock, and they know what's happening. And for Chelsea, this is the end of the Abramovich era. And of course, Chelsea being for sale now, we can look at the overview of Roman Abramovich with Chelsea. He bought Chelsea in 2003 for £140 million, 21 trophies under his ownership, 2 Champions League in 2012-2021. We'll break down all the results in a second. The club is valued right now north of £3 billion. He will also forgive Chelsea's debt of £1.5 billion that he has personally loaned to Chelsea. He'll forget that debt. He'll forget also the the profit that he could make between 140 to 3 billion and redistribute that money, which of course is, I guess, a worthy gesture. It is a very big amount of money and tells you a lot about someone when $3 billion doesn't really change your life. It's because you got a whole lot where that comes from. What was your first thought when you heard Not only the news a couple of days ago when he decided to put the club under stewardship, but when yesterday it was official that he's actually looking for buyers for Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you have a lot of conflicting thoughts going on at once when you're talking about something like this. This is a very significant footballing move, and it's a very significant change from what I and most people around me are used to understanding and viewing the Premier League with. He has been if you don't know, if you're viewing from outside North America, outside Canada, really 2001, 2, 3, 4, that early part of the 2000s is when we first started to really get the league in our living rooms pretty consistently, that we could watch them week in, week out. You could a little bit before that, but that was really the beginning of the era that we're now in, I think, in terms of the global reach of that league. And he's been a big part of that. And I know because I studied the history of the sport. I was interested in it before. I did follow it the best I could before. I know that Chelsea wasn't always capital C Chelsea before. They were good, but they weren't where they were now. And once that money came in, and it really was the first person to put that amount of money in, he was the true first. He begot City, who begot PSG, who begot Newcastle down the line, right?
The original money, like the OG, the original guy with the money.
And it changed the game. Many people will say for the worst, but regardless of your opinion of that, you can't deny that it changed the game.
Oh, yeah. And especially if you're a Chelsea fan, it changed the game.
The balance of power.
And if you're a Chelsea fan, it changed it, right? And even if Manchester, that was a blueprint for Manchester City, basically. Without Chelsea, there's no Manchester City today. Without Chelsea in 2003, 2004, there's no Manchester City since 2013. And that is also true. And you talked about the era. You talked about Abramovich and the amount of investment he did bring into the club that actually saw results. And I think it's important to take a second and look at the trophy case of Chelsea since 2004, to be fair. 21 trophies, Duane. That's a lot. 5 league titles. In their history, Chelsea has 6. 5 of those happened since 2003. 2005, 6, of course, that's the first era of Jose Mourinho. And you also had, of course, the 2015 and the 2017 era, not too long ago. I guess that's also the Mourinho era at some point there. You have the Conte era in 2017, the Tuchel era with the Champions League in 2021, 2012, Drogba, Champions League, this goal scored at the 83rd minute. What a great moment. That's when I truly fell in love with that club. That's why today I'm wearing my Chelsea jersey. Club World Cup, that was this year. That's a trophy. It's an official trophy. It counts in the trophy case. Europa League twice, 2013, 2019. Who says you can't do a double in Europe? Yes, it's the Champions League and Europa League, but they did do a double in 2012, 2013. FA Cup, 5 FA Cup under Abramovich. 2007, 2009, 2010, 2012, and 2018. 3 League Cups, Super Cup, and Community Shields, which at some point were called a Charity Shield also. But they got 2 of those. That's quite the trophy case for a team in the last 2 decades.
Well, you said, they only had 1 league title prior to the money coming in. Just to give you some context, if you don't know the history, I know a lot of people will say, City doesn't have any history. Well, they had 3 before their money came in, right? Like, that tells you something about where, relatively speaking, Chelsea was before. They were always kind of known as a kind of a posh club that had some bad supporters and kind of underachieved. They were like kind of Team Hollywood for a while, if you go way back in their history. And that completely changed. They are now, I don't think without a doubt, they are absolutely among the most successful clubs in the world. I mean, 2 Champions League trophies speak to that. Absolutely. And, they don't always do it with the flair of some other teams. They don't get the same press of those other teams, but, they've been successful, and that's the bottom line. And they've been successful because of the way that every team that exists in the world has always been successful. The scale just changed, and that is that they had investment. So with the owner leaving and putting, again, as a could plan be a back, to put all of the reasons why on the shelf. We've talked about them in detail all week. We are not dismissing the importance of those at all, but that's a typical football conversation right now. You just don't know what the change is going to be, because he left, what was 1.5 billion is what the loan is that he's going to forgive because he can afford it. I don't know whether the new folks coming in, particularly if it's the American business model that's being suggested, is going to forgive $1.5 billion dollars.
They won't. They'll never do that. American companies do not forgive money. Like $1.5, I don't think they'll forgive that. Never mind $1.5 billion. That's, I guess, is where I want to look at this now. Is this the end of Chelsea battling for trophies, for titles, for Champions League? Is this the end of European night at Stamford Bridge? Is it the end of the romantic owner? Because let's face it, as much as we want to talk about the money and whatever, Abramovich, with his recent decision, and saying it and doing it are two different things, and I'll be fully honest here that I hope he does do it, but we still don't know if he's actually going to go through with the whole, but I'm pretty sure he's going to donate the proceeds and everything. So the philanthropy aspect of his selling of Chelsea is laudable, but will we see Chelsea battle for trophies, battle for big signings, big names? Haaland, I think that ship has sailed with this sale, and that maybe is one of the consequences of Roman Abramovich selling Chelsea. Is Chelsea might not be a top 3, top 4 destination for transfer targets.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to have the London card in its pocket, right? I mean, it's in a world-class city. And when your competitors in England are in the Northwest, right, in what are, having been there, they're lovely cities, but they're provincial cities, right? And they're not necessarily going to have the same cachet to someone outside of England. But, yeah, I don't think they're going to fall off the map. I don't think that's realistic. We compared them already to one Manchester club. Let's compare them to the other Manchester club, and I think that might be the better comparison because of the ownership structure that's going to come into play. What I'm saying is what Chelsea might look like in the immediate future is something like United looks like right now. They're still good. They are. They're still able to attract some good targets. They still spend money at a level that is above 99% of the clubs in the world, but they might not be spending at that top 1% anymore because you don't have the passion ownership there anymore. And I think when you're talking about them, what you do have to think, regardless of what you think of his politics, right? Like, regardless of that, you do have to agree, I think, that he is clearly a fan of the sport and clearly a fan of Chelsea. He just wanted to win trophies. That was pure that way. Yeah, there's some sport washing aspect to it. Even the way he's handling the sale is sport washing in a sense. He wants to maintain his reputation because he's a businessman.
And also I was going to say he doesn't want to impede the club because of some of his assets might actually be frozen, and that could actually impede the current season of the club. And he didn't want that to be not only a distraction, but a deterrent and even like an obstacle in the club's day-to-day operations.
Yeah, and absolutely. And look, he's not the only person from Russia. Only business person in Russia, only business coming from Russia that is trying to desperately get rid of assets and trying to distance himself as quickly as possible from the current political scene there.
The amount of Russian companies changing hands right now across the world, the amount of different things too happening in ways like seeing sponsorship deals being canceled, F1 contracts being canceled, companies severing ties with Russian companies, not only for now, for the long term. That's happening across the board, from cycling team like Rusvelo, who the company just decided to stop giving bikes and parts, to F1, to, of course, Chelsea being affected by this situation. And as a fan of Chelsea, I can mention this. I am worried, of course, for the future of the club. Not that the club will disappear or will dwindle into becoming like Everton and close to relegation. But, I do feel where this could be the end of the golden era of Chelsea. And now might be, Chelsea were pioneers, being the oil money. Maybe this is the first time where it's the end of oil money across the board too. And maybe Chelsea can be a pioneer in bringing analytics to the level of a Premier League team and winning without necessarily spending $500 million or euros a year. It's interesting how in hardship there's opportunities, and maybe Chelsea can take the opportunity now to already look ahead and decide what type of team will it need to win down the road, because money will not always be the answer.
Yes, some would argue Liverpool is the leader in that side of things and finding the best for the least, right? I mean, Liverpool still spends, again, above the 99%, but they find that edge. Look who they're owned by. They're owned by the Red Sox. They do the same thing on the baseball side of things.
Which is what I'm might happen because future Chelsea owners might be an American business conglomerate. Yeah.
Yeah, from another club that does very similar to the Dodgers. But yeah, look, I mean, in the sense of this, they were the first in the door in terms of the big, ridiculous money. It seems like they're going to be the first out of that door too, in terms of that owner leaving. So we don't know what it looks like when one of those ownership groups changes and they have to revert back to a more traditional ownership structure. We haven't seen it before. This will happen eventually. When it will happen at City eventually, it will happen at Newcastle eventually. We just got it over now. The things are going to change. And you never know with world politics right now. Those two things might change faster than we think, right? So this could be a blueprint of how you evolve out. And the questions are, what kind of structures have you created during that time with the money you have to allow yourself to continue on as a global brand, as a player in the transfer market in a way that makes sense with the new ownership structure. And we just don't know what it's going to look like, but I think it's going to change. Things change. Like I kind of believe in a theory of 20s. Things kind of happen in 20-year cycles, and we're kind of going through that change again in the world.
It's true.
And you look back to 1980,
1990s, like
80, 2000. There's been changes. If you look back historically speaking, I'm talking more than sports here now.
Or even 30s, because what happened in the early 90s? Oh yeah, the fall of the USSR. Oh wait, that's very topical right now. So maybe 20s, 30s, 40s. You're right. Maybe there's a cycle there, and it'll be important to keep an eye and see how Chelsea, its fans, and of course the front office of Chelsea handles this sale. Hopefully the players can continue the good results on the pitch. It is also important for fans like me. Duane and I will take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about the Canadian Championship. We have updates, dates, and pots to talk about. We'll also break down a brand new designated player in Major League Soccer joining St. Louis City SC for 2023. Klauss. We'll talk about that and more after this short break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Kev Laramie with Dwayne Rollins as we break down some of the great news in the world of football with a soccer perspective. Dwayne, a new designated player has been signed in Major League Soccer. St. Louis City SC with their first designated player in their club history. The club hasn't even played a game yet. It will join Major League Soccer in 2023, but already has a DP signed a 25-year-old striker named Joao Klauss. No, not German. He's Brazilian. Brazilian Joao Klauss, known as Klaus. Only one name. That's when you know they're Brazilians. And to me, he might be a bargain. He might be a good acquisition, but also a risky one. Let's have a look at his numbers in his career, Dwayne. 25 years old, striker, 6'3", which is not a small feat. You can't teach height. We talked about this. 130 games in his career. That is with Offenheim, on loan to Standard Liège in Belgium, also on loan in Sint-Truiden in Belgium. Also, he played for Lask in Austria, and he was developed in Grêmio. He played the most amount of time in his youth career in Grêmio in the youth academy of that team from Brazil, Serie A's league. 45 goals, 8 assists, 6 goals from the penalty spot, which gives us a goals plus assists per game of 0.57 in his career. That is not bad. That's a goal or an assist almost 2 every 3 games. It's almost 66%. It's 57, but it's almost 2/3. And you look at the team points per match, 1.85. You can round that up to 3, and there's no 2 points, so that's 3. So that's pretty good. Most of the time when he plays, his team wins. And for St. Louis, if you don't want to be Cincinnati to start, that could be the way to go.
Yeah, for sure. The build I compare them to is Nashville, right? In terms of they've even said that. Their ownership group says they're not going to have the big bucks going in, just like Nashville said. That's trying to damper expectations that you're not going to see Messi roll into town. Don't get crazy out there, people. He's probably going to go to Miami and not be very good down there, but that's a different story for a different day.
I thought you were going to say he's going to go to Paris and not being good down there, but that's right now.
They were trying to pump his brakes or not pump his brakes. They were trying to pump his tires the other day, saying he has 11 assists, and people are going, yeah, but he's in Ligue 1. He's feeding, Mbappe and Neymar.
I would probably have 3 assists because you just give the ball basically to Neymar or Mbappe in their territory and they would score. Yeah. But anyways, go ahead.
Anyway, to get back to Klauss, he's a player I don't know a ton about, to be frank, and I think that's part of it too. But what I do like about those numbers, again, 0.5 is pretty damn good. And when you look at the leagues he's in, and they're comparable. We've seen a lot of success of Belgian players either going away. I think Belgium and MLS are very comparable levels, so I would look at his numbers there and think that you could probably convert them almost 1-for-1 back to MLS as what likely his level will be, because then that's just based on past transfers coming in, which is always the best way to evaluate. If you don't know the player that well, look at what league he came from, look at the level he played at that league, and comparable to other players that have come from that league. There's even a website out there that does this for you. I forget it off the top of my head. Yeah. It's quite.
And if you give me 1 second, I will also give you his comparables. I do have him in front of me. Can I get there in time? But yeah, FB Reference does have comparable players also. So if you are a stats guy, you can look on FB Reference and have some, I guess, comparable players. So as a young striker like this, there's not a whole lot because he's also a very tall striker. Mm-hmm. And let's not kid ourselves, that will be important in his game. You're going to have a tactical awareness, I guess, in St. Louis that will be, like, it's a new coach, right? It's a new coach too. We've talked about a coach a few months ago when it was announced. We're not talking about a coach with the most amount of experience. It's a new project, and together they're going to learn. And if you got one tall striker and someone who can put balls in the box, right? Well, that's a few wins in the season right away. And I think that he's 6'3". That's a big part of it. His best foot is his right foot. 87% of his goals are scored with his right foot. So we're looking at a young player coming in here to prove himself. He never really established himself anywhere. Offenheim, quite frankly, quit on him a couple of years ago and just sends him in Belgium. He played decently for Standard de Liège, and now is to Saint Truden, which is, yes, first division, but a little lower league team, even closer relegation type of team versus Standard de Liège, who wants to battle for a title every year. But, Major League Soccer is a good place to have your second chance in your career sometimes.
Yeah, precisely. And look, he'll get opportunity here. I'm not sure if their plan is to immediately bring him over because St. Louis is, in fact, operating an MLS Next Pro team this year. That would be an interesting use of that spot, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see how clubs, particularly expansion teams, use that Next Pro in moving forward, because it is an opportunity to get those guys playing in a system for them earlier. We've seen St. Louis make a couple other signings at that level with an eye, you would think, to next year. So it is just another thing to look at. And look, unless you have the money of an Atlanta United, it is foolhardy to try and replicate what they did, because first off, there are questions about how they did it in the first place, to be blunt. Other teams that have tried it have failed miserably.
What are you saying? The guy who did it went somewhere else and kind of broke the rules? Oh, no, I think got there just in time.
I'm not saying anything in detail of what happened in Atlanta. I am just saying what factually we know what happened after. So at any rate, but regardless, even if he didn't do that there, he still had more money than you could ever imagine most expansion teams having to spend on those 3 DPs. And he nailed it. He nailed it with Alderone. That was, and Martinez too, but Alderone was the one guy that was difference making. He's one of the best players that has ever played in this league. And that, when you nail a hit like that, everything's gonna come from it. And you know what? You're not gonna get that good of a signing all the time. So that's a bit of luck involved in that a lot of times.
Obviously, there's always luck in Major League Soccer as the new players. People don't want to admit it, but there is luck in DP signings. And we'll see if this works out. But Klauss comes in with not as much clout as others, and he's young though, so there's a little bit of that going. But that's an interesting aspect. To finish the show, Duane, an interesting topic, one of our favorite topics in the history of this show, is the Canadian Championship, is the Voyageurs Cup Final. Finally, we'll get the 2020 version of the Voyageurs Cup Final in Hamilton on June 2nd, as Duane touches his beautiful scarf right there to his left from that game that never happened. And it will happen now on June 2nd, 2020. What will also happen is the Canadian Championship in 2022. Here are the details announced by Canada Soccer. Yesterday, the official draw will take place on May 9th, 2022, available on the different social media of One Soccer and on One Soccer's platform. 13 clubs to be drawn in 4 pots. We'll break down the pots in a second. The first round is 10 clubs. 5 will move on. It's knockout matches, single elimination. From 10, you go to the quarterfinals. There's 3 clubs that have buys. So 5 plus 3, 8 clubs. The 3 clubs that have buys: Pacific FC, of course, CF Montreal, defending champions, and Toronto FC. From the quarterfinals to the semifinals, 4 clubs. And it will end in a final of 2 clubs. It starts in May. It will finish in July this year. And the pots are as follows. We have in pot number 1, which is dubbed the West Pot, Vancouver Whitecaps, Cavalry FC, FC Edmonton, and Valor are your teams in pot 1. Vancouver does not have a bye because of its recent performance in the championships over the last 2 years, being eliminated by Pacific FC and Cavalry. And you know what, Duane? No one's complaining about the lack of bye in Vancouver. Pot 2 East, Forge FC, York United, Atletico Ottawa, HFX Wanderers. Pot 3 East, Guelph United and CS Montréal Outremont, the 2 teams from Ligue 1 Ontario and from PLSQ here in Quebec. And the Pot 4, which is the buys, Pacific FC, Toronto FC, and the defending champions, CF Montreal. Are you sad for Vancouver that they do not have a bye?
No, not at all. I hope they draw the Guelph United, is personally what I hope happens, or whoever. Look, you got to base it on something. Like, there are people, you should know one's complaining. There's always someone complaining about something. What they're complaining about is the third bye involved there. And they say, well, why does Toronto get a bye? And, I get that. But the answer to that question is math, because they had to make it work somehow into a bracket. So
you need 3 buys, because otherwise there's too many teams. So there
they
you
gave
go.
the 2 finalists and the highest rated CanPL team in the draw. That's how they've determined it, and it was performance based. That's really all you can hope for. And I can't tell you definitively that had there not, there's going to be people out there that are going to believe that everything in the center of the universe is manipulated so that we get everything. Whatever, believe what you want, guys. It's fine. But look, Vancouver doesn't deserve it based on their play. They don't. They made the playoffs here in MLS, but it's a different competition. And if he wants to get a bye next year, then they need to win games in the Canadian Championship and win a Canadian Championship again. They've only got to 1, despite having, for years and years and years, it basically being a 3-team competition, and they've lost in comical ways over the years. So we'll see about that. But
yeah, they've lost in very, very weird ways around across the time, but I'm not going to complain about it, though neither did you. And it'll be interesting to see how this thing continues to be important. And of course, over the years, the Canadian Championship will change a little bit going forward. We know, of course, in the year after, CPL gets also a bye. There's a Leagues Cup. There's everything, continentally speaking, is changing. And we'll see how the Canadian Championship evolves to find its place in the whole landscape of continental soccer.
Yeah, look, you would hope eventually, the ideal situation would be eventually that obviously BC League One will hopefully come in next year. At least they're champion. A lot of people would like it that all of those teams were involved in them. And in an ideal world, if I'm making a football manager, sim, if I'm going to do it there, I'm going to have all those teams involved. But the reality is all those teams don't have the money and the resources to be involved yet. We need to build the competition up to the point that there's enough prize money, there's enough incentive to get teams that don't necessarily have the same amount of, cash flow to be able to compete without, straining their budgets too much. And that's what you've got to think about this. This is real world example. And I know, having talked to Dino Rossi before, the Commissioner of League One Ontario, about this, that what he's told me is that they would love that, obviously, but right now only having 1 representative allows them to pool resources to help that team compete to the best of their ability. Whereas if all the teams are involved, he, at least the last time I spoke to him, didn't feel that they would be able to compete at the same level. That Guelph team is really interesting. They were a new team. And their keeper, if you don't know the story, was out there. He's of Ukrainian descent. So to put this a full bow on this, he actually was on a trial for a Division II Ukrainian team when this broke out. And rather than get home, he's volunteered.
Yeah, so he called Philip Dos Santos, manager of Valor FC, and says, okay, I'm not on my way to here. I'm going to take the train, and in 5 hours, I'm at the battlefront.
Yeah, and I forget the man's name right now because we didn't think we were going to talk about this, but look it up. It's easy to find. It's an interesting story.
Yeah, there's also hockey players that were in Russia and in Ukraine from around here that were playing and just had to leave. Really, there's a lot of human stories coming out of Russia.
There's a lot of stories for sure and displacement, absolutely. But but even beyond that Guelph team is an example of what League One Ontario I think is starting to become. You're seeing a couple new teams come in next year. That Barrie team, Simcoe, they really put a lot of investment in. They have some star investment in. They're going heavy on the women's side. Like they clearly have aspirations beyond this. Electric City FC is coming in next year, which is out of Peterborough.
Yes, and shout out to our friend that we've had on the show a few times. And of course, when I want to say a shout out, his name just escapes me.
There you go. But
Keaton Robbins. Keaton. Shout out to Keaton Robbins in Electric City Football Club.
The point is these teams are coming in with ambition. Guelph came in with ambition. They won the title within a year. They're already here. This is a bit different from when I worked at League One Ontario back 2013, 2014, where it was kind of closer to the youth side than it was to the men's side. And this is getting much closer to what the vision that I know, having known Dino back in the day when he was launching this thing, what he wanted. So it's great to see. And hopefully one day, I hope they get an upset one day. I'd love to see the PLSQ team or the League One Ontario team get a win over a pro team one day. It would be great.
It's the first time that it's not Blainville for the PLSQ also. That would be Outremont. And it's kind of fun to see a different team, and hopefully this Outremont team can fare well. It's a team that it's not located too far away from where I am, so maybe I will get involved in not cheering, but keeping a closer eye on that team. And that will wrap the show up for today. Thank you for your patience with us as we troubleshoot, as we put this show through its paces this way. We hope the audio is becoming better for you. We're going to keep on working. We, of course, are open, to advertising opportunities. You can email us at sportspodcastnetwork@gmail.com if something that you would like. We're looking for, of course, computer parts, computer equipment, audio parts for the next few months. If it's something that you think you can help us, if you know someone that can, please reach out to us. It's something that would really help us put this show a little even higher in the production value department. That's where we're at, and with your help we can bring it even further into the YouTube world, podcast world, and broadcasting world for the future. On that note, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Larme, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. We'll be back with a brand new edition on Friday, looking at the weekend in Major League Soccer. We'll break down some of the interesting matchup that we think we need to keep an eye on. We'll look quickly at the Premier League and across, of course, the landscape of European soccer. But as always, until tomorrow, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kev Larme. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.